entertaining. I've had a chance to watch the film, and I had so much fun watching it, so congratulations.
Thank you, man. That's really great to hear. It's always nice when people get the joke.
So, mate, tell us a little bit about Sewer Gators. How did the idea for this film come about for you?
Yeah, my grandmother is from Brooklyn, New York, and when I was a kid, she always told me stories about the alligators in the sewers, right? And over the years, it just kind of percolated in the back of my mind, and I kind of wrote it, honestly, just as a writing exercise. I more obviously copied the plot of Jaws pretty closely, but just to get something on paper and do some practice writing. And then after COVID hit, I realized it's been a few years since I made anything, and so I pulled out this script and dusted it off, called some folks, and made it happen.
So, there's the story about gators in the sewers. Here in Australia, we hear things like that people in America occasionally flush baby gators down toilets and things like that, and that they really exist. Tell us a little bit about that story, especially that your grandmother told you, and is it true or is it not true?
So, yeah, the urban legend, I guess you would say, is that in the 50s and 60s, New York tourists would come down to like Louisiana or Florida, and they would sell baby alligators at these different like roadside attractions. And basically, when the alligators started to get too big, they would flush it down the toilet. And then the idea was that once it's in the sewer, it starts, living off of garbage, and usually it turns into an albino and then seeks human flesh if you really want to get into it. My grandmother was a very macabre woman who would really do up the details when we were kids to try to scare us about going to the bathroom. So, yeah, do they really exist? Not in the form that they like to advertise it. I will say that there definitely are situations where alligators have meandered into sewers for sure. And yeah, I mean, in the 50s and 60s, they did actually sell baby alligators to tourists because, the South of America is a lawless place. And I'm sure at some point somebody flushed one down a toilet. So who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Did it work in scaring you? Because I had a babysitter when I was very young who told me that wolves used to walk around the halls of our house of a night time after we all went to bed, and I was terrified as a kid to go out into the hallway because of that, which is ridiculous because we don't even have wolves in Australia.
Yeah, no, dude, that is exactly the same kind of a thing. I would hold in basically everything, so I didn't have to go to the bathroom because I was petrified as a child. I was a big scaredy cat, I guess is the polite way to put it.
Now, you mentioned that this came about because of a writing exercise that you were doing for yourself. Is that something that you do quite frequently? Because I'm a screenwriter myself, and I know a lot of our lecturers at film school told us that writing exercises are the best way to keep your mind active and to keep your skills going. Is that something that you do quite often as a screenwriter?
Yeah, I once listened to an interview with P.T. Anderson where he was talking about just the awfulness that is the blank page, right? When you sit down at your keyboard and you can't think of anything to write. And he talked about basically just even copying somebody else's thing as a way to just have words on the page, just so you're not confronted with that awfulness of the empty page. So yeah, I frequently will just sit down and just take any sort of random idea, good, bad, or indifferent, and just try to do something with it, just to get it out of my head, I guess, and do a little work on the writing front. And occasionally, something is yielded from it. Usually, it's not, but every now and then too, it'll turn into something that you're like, oh, well, that's this whole piece doesn't work, but there's something interesting here, and I can take that and wind up stealing from myself, right? Just taking the bits that work and putting them into different things.
So it sounds like you do a fair bit of writing. What was it that made you decide this was the right time for Sewer Gators to come to the screen?
Oh man, it's one of those things again that it had just been a few years just because of circumstances, obviously, of the world that I hadn't done anything. My last film was a movie called Fast Food and Cigarettes, which is a very, very, very different type of film. It's a heist movie with no dialogue, and that one was really I put a lot of sort of you wouldn't know this to look at it, I guess, but I put a lot of personal stuff into that one. And, I sort of had this yearning to go back and do something that was just kind of silly and fun. The world today is so just, everywhere you turn, it's bad news, right? And I kind of just wanted to do something that was just, I'm going to get my friends together, we're going to have a laugh, and maybe when people watch it, they'll get that sense of fun out of it.
So the cast that we see on screen, are they all friends of yours, or did you have to go out and look for certain actors and actresses for certain parts?
Well, yeah, I'm very, very fortunate in that I've made a handful of movies now, and so that I have sort of a stable, I guess you would say, of actors who keep coming back and doing my crappy movies for some reason. And I'm not sure why they keep agreeing to do it, but I'm always happy that they do. And over the years, I've become friends with all those people. So I'd say about half of them are actual, honest to God, hardworking actors who are out there doing real gigs, and real, I say real gigs as opposed to my silly movies. And then the other half are just folks I went to high school with, people I've known for the longest time, and I kind of stick them in there here and there, and hey, you'd be great at this part, and all that kind of stuff, and goad them and guilt them into doing bit parts in the movie.
So do you now, when you sit down to write a script, do you write different parts into your script of people that you know that will fit in that role?
Definitely, yeah, I definitely do that. That's one of those things that I would never write a script thinking like, oh, well, we'll get Jack Nicholson to play this, right? Because obviously at my budget level, I can't afford those folks. But I know pretty well, of the folks that I'm friendly with who do acting, who will be willing to do stuff, and I know kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. So yeah, I definitely go into it writing specific parts for specific people. I mean, that's true definitely of like, Sean Phelan, who plays the mayor in the movie. He's just got this very dry, silly sense of humor, and he's one of my favorite people, and reminds me a lot of Norm Macdonald. And I wrote that character with him in mind because he's just such a sort of goofball.
Yep. So where did you go to film Sewer Gators? Did you know ahead of time where you were going to go to film?
Not before writing the script. I knew basically that I knew that I didn't have a budget to really play around with, unfortunately. So I knew I needed to sort of reorganize the script in a way that we could do it very, very quickly. So Carter Simino, who's a good friend of mine, who's one of the producers on the movie, he let us use his office for his day job. His boss basically said, yeah, you guys can use it on the weekend, which allowed us a lot of flexibility and freedom to be able to shoot in there and get multiple sets and multiple setups in kind of one day. So that was where we shot the bulk of it at. And then, the exteriors and things we picked off here and there, and we were able to, all in, we shot it in about 4 days, being completely honest.
Wow. So with such a limited budget, how do you then create the gators? Because you go to some pretty creative lengths into having gators as such in this film. So how do you do that on such a tight budget?
Yeah, I realized pretty early on that you basically just need to lean into it, right? Because it was one of those, like, I'm not a big fan of CGI. I know there's some in the movie just out of necessity, but I knew that even if I wanted to do CGI, we didn't have the budget to do it, and if we did, it would be just awful looking, basically. So we sort of decided, all right, let's go the other way. Let's just kind of be as silly as we can with it, right? We'll use toy alligators from the dollar store, basically doing a throwback to when I was a kid playing in the backyard trying to make movies. And all right, what would I have done back then to make it? So that was a big part of it. We had a rubber prop alligator that we bought. It was a couple $100, and bought an alligator head because you can buy those here in South Louisiana. And we actually had to cut the jaw in half so we could manipulate it because they're sort of what's the word? Not stuffed, but taxidermy. So
Yep.
They're locked in place. So yeah, we actually cut the jaw in half and put hinges on it so that we could maneuver it around for certain scenes. And all in, it was really just a matter of like, okay, what can we do that's just kind of be silly and fun, because that's what this movie is.
So what's your advice to young filmmakers who are listening at the moment who want to go out and make movies on tight budgets? Because when I was in film school, we used to borrow the equipment from the school and head out on a weekend and shoot films on zero budget. But these days, a lot of young filmmakers are being told in film schools, oh, don't do that. Wait until you meet somebody with a little bit of money that they can put into your films instead. What's your advice to those young filmmakers? Should they go out and make films on zero budget? And if so, what's your advice for them to then go and do that?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, right, and I obviously could be very wrong here, but I think that it's definitely worthwhile to get out there with, the no budget. Everybody's got a decent camera on their cell phone now. Realistically, the cost has come down in order to make stuff so exponentially. You don't need the huge budgets. And the other element of it, too, is, I've done some bigger budget things, and there's a certain level of, if you're doing it for no money, and you screw it up, which you inevitably will on your first several projects, it allows you the freedom to not have wasted, somebody's money. So by the time you get around to the place where you actually have a decent budget and you can do the things, you kind of know how to maneuver. Oh, we're losing the light. We need to get this scene in the can. We have 20 setups left, but the sun's going to be down in 5 minutes. How are we going to cover the scene? You can figure that out basically while you're out there, and it's not costing anybody anything other than their time. And I think that's invaluable if you want to make films.
Definitely, that is amazing advice. And I guess, Paul, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there before they sit down and watch Sewer Gators?
Yeah, basically, I think it's just it's a silly, silly movie, and if you go into it expecting a silly, goofy movie, you sit down and watch it with some of your friends, have a couple of drinks while you do it, you're in for a good time. There are worse ways to spend an hour, and if you hate it, it's only an hour, so it's not too much of a commitment.
Well,